Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Podcast. I am your host, Richie Leahy. Today I'm going to be on the phone with Maddie B. We are going to be talking about the NCAA basketball tournament. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into it, get on with the interview, and then I'll be back here in a little bit. So enjoy. All right, I'm here with Maddie B. We are talking the NCAA basketball tournament. It actually kicks off tonight. And I'm just about to put up an article, hopefully, that will be live by the time this comes out, on why I don't think it's fair that automatic qualifying teams have to play in these first four games. I think growing up close to St. Francis University, they were actually in the NEC championship last week. They lost to Mount St. Mary's, and now I'm watching Mount St. Mary's have to play in this play-in game. So even though they won their tournament, they're not really in the actual tournament, which I think is a ripoff compared to other teams that make it that don't win their conference. What do you think of that?
I think when you're looking at a school like these smaller tier schools, like a Mount St. Mary's, I think it's okay to have the play-in. Even though they're still counting as a Division I program and they're still everything factors in, I think it's okay to have that. Plus, it gives the opening for some of these smaller schools to find their way in. Bottom line is, if you're winning a lot of these games outright and you're having a higher win-loss total, you're in easily anyhow. I think the only teams that it really hurts are the people that have lost a couple games along the way, and now you got to fight your way in anyhow.
Well, I'm saying Mount St. Mary's is only in, and I could be wrong, they're only in because they won their conference. So what I would like to see is the first four be only teams that have received, what are they, non-automatic bids, or they made at-large, I guess is what they call it.
Yeah.
So like I look at a team like Wake Forest and Kansas State, two pretty big-time programs. They have to play in the first four. I think that's going to garner better ratings for the TV network, so they're going to like that. And then it gives some of these teams a chance, like Mount St. Mary's. Those guys, they probably didn't even receive scholarships to bigger schools. Their only dream is to win their conference, to make the tournament, and now they have to fly to Dayton for these playing games. I just don't think it's fair to kids that like dedicate their whole lives to one sport these days. They don't have the adulation. I guarantee attendance is in the low thousands, if that, at some of these schools. So this is their chance for a big time. For some of the smaller guys, that's their only way of even getting any scouts to watch them for the NBA draft. And they won't even get drafted. They would have to make it through like the D League or whatever.
I see the point, but I also think the NCAA is looking at it with these first four playing games. It's a moneymaker. That you could take whoever, whether it's at large or lower tier conference champions, have them playing, and now instead of you're expanding it from 64 to even more now.
Yeah, that's a problem. Once you get it expanded, I mean, I know they count it as a tournament. They still get to hang up the banner that says that they played in the tournament, but it just seems weird. They should either. Well, I don't want them to expand it more. I guess they should drop it off, but that will never happen.
Well, I think, this is where some of the arguments with the college football playoff. Right now it's at 4, and there are talks of expanding. You have the March Madness tournament that they're still, at what point do you say enough's enough, and we're only going with X number of teams? I think there, no matter what number you have, there's always, if you cut it at 64, then 65 and 66 are going to say, well, why shouldn't we be in and have a reasonable argument? I just think you got to win your games. If you win your games and you're competitive in your own conference, it sets you up for a better position to make your run in the playoffs.
Well, I'm sure we're going to revisit this in the future, just because you said about the college football. But I wonder if, I don't know the amount of teams that are in college basketball Division I per se. I know for football it's like 130 or 128 maybe. But they could figure out and just set it up so that only a certain percentage is allowed to make the playoffs. And then that's going to cut it artificially If they keep expanding as teams apply for that football bowl division, then yeah, they could potentially expand the playoffs, but then at least that gives it a cutoff so that talking heads shouldn't theoretically complain about it. It's like a legal thing or I guess it wouldn't be like legal, but it would give them a clear-cut reason that says, hey, we don't want all these kids getting hurt. Basketball, are there 200 teams maybe? I don't even know how many there are that qualify. So 64, I don't know what percentage that is. And I'll have to do the math. Maybe I'll tweet that out later. I'll look it up and see and try to get that going. But looking at the bracket here, who do you think is going to make the Final Four? Do you have your picks?
I did fill out my brackets, and unconventionally, my Final Four is Villanova, Notre Dame, Oregon, and Butler.
Why did you settle on those teams? Very unconventional picks.
Well, truth be told, I don't follow as much basketball as I probably should through the year. So there's some of these teams that I have no idea, and I feel like every year it's a crapshoot of who's going to end up going far. So I looked at a couple different statistics. First one I looked at was free throw percentage, and I think once you hit the tournament, if you're a team that can consistently knock down your shots from the foul line, those are going to be teams that are going to be able to make a run, especially if you have a lead late in the game and you're getting fouled. If you can't convert on the free throw line, then you're probably going to end up blowing it. You're looking at teams like Notre Dame and Villanova that are at almost 80%. Oregon was at 71 and Butler was at 74% from the free throw line. I think that really helps as far as your games. Another factor I looked into was the defensive statistics, because they say defense wins championships, and being able to not have turnovers. Those four teams converted. They had a very low amount of turnovers per game, and I think that's going to be. Those were some of the factors that I looked at when you're playing. Are you going to? It's not just a one game shot, but it's through the course of the season they had the lowest turnovers per game, and I think that kind of fed my rationale for having those four in.
That's some good, solid reasoning. I actually, from that, the one team that I did have as a sleeper would be Notre Dame. They made the actual Elite Eight the past 2 years, I believe. So they've been close to making a run. I mean, the same can be said about Gonzaga. So that's going to be a brutal, if it plays out, Sweet 16 matchup between Gonzaga and Notre Dame. Or would that be, yeah, because Gonzaga has South Dakota State and then the winner of Northwestern Vanderbilt. It's pretty conceivable that they would be able to run through that. Notre Dame has to face a tough West Virginia team. But I think that's going to be one of the most exciting sides of the bracket off the bat. The seeding was so weird this year. Like, I didn't think Michigan State was going to get in, and then they got in as a 9.
Yeah. One of the things that I was hearing from the big cable networks was talking about how it's not just based off of the conference tournaments. It's based on the whole year and how they've been monitoring teams through the course of the whole season. So even though maybe a team just started playing, got hot at the tournament, didn't necessarily mean that was where they were going to fall seed-wise.
Well, Michigan State, I didn't think they should be in it at all. I don't know. I'm going to look up here and see what their schedule was, but they didn't have any big wins. They didn't win They didn't win the conference. They didn't win the conference tournament. So they lost to Arizona. They lost to Kentucky. They lost to Baylor. They lost to Duke. They have, just looking here, they beat Minnesota. They split with Michigan, another tournament team. And that's it. Their last games, they went 1-3. And yet they made it as a 9 seed. I don't understand. And wow, it gets even worse than that. There's a brutal stretch. They lost to Ohio State, Indiana, Purdue, and they lost to Penn State. It's a neutral game. I don't know why they played them neutral. But it looks like they played a lot of tough teams, but they didn't win any. I see that they did beat some tournament teams. They beat Florida Gulf Coast, and they beat Wichita State. But that's it. 2 non-conference wins against tournament teams. The rest of them, they played a tough schedule, but they lost. So
maybe they're just rewarding them for trying to schedule the tough non-conference instead of, putting a bunch of fluff games on there and having a much higher record.
Yeah, that's what I'm not sure. And they need to start being clear about it, because there were some teams, like Syracuse did the same thing. The guy from ESPN, Lenardi, he kept saying Syracuse was in, even though I had a feeling they weren't going to get in. They had the same deal as Michigan State. So if Michigan State would have made it and they would have played in the first four, I wouldn't have been surprised. But why are they a 9 seed? And then you have a team like Wake Forest or Kansas State that might have bigger wins, and then they have to play in the play-in game. And I know the Michigan State guy is head of the committee. I would hope that that doesn't play a factor in it. But I don't know. Some of the other seedings are weird too. Like Wisconsin ended up being an 8 seed after they were runner-up in the Big Ten regular season, and they were runner-up in the Big Ten championship game, the tournament. So they were second in both, and I'm pretty sure, let me look at their schedule here. They beat Syracuse, who didn't make it. So their non-conference wasn't too bad. I mean, they lost to UNC, they lost to Creighton, 2 tournament teams. But then the fall all the way to 8th is mind-boggling. And I know that they stacked. This is another thing. It looked like they put like 3 Big Ten teams in one corner of the bracket, and they did the same thing with the Big 12, which seemed odd because normally they try to split up teams, and they would never have 3 teams meet before the Final Four if possible.
Right.
So you have Michigan State, Purdue, Michigan in one bracket, and then in that same bracket you have Kansas, Iowa State, and Oklahoma State. So the Midwest bracket has 3 teams from the Big 12 and 3 from the Big 10. So it doesn't allow that conference to show its depth, because even if a team gets on a run, they're going to cannibalize each other.
Right. And I don't know. I don't understand the rationale for how they're seeding people and how those are playing out. But it definitely looks like there was just an issue with it.
Yeah, I would say that they definitely tried to put teams together. So, like, I know you follow Florida State. They put Florida State in the West, and then they made Florida Gulf Coast in the West so that they could have a matchup, which I would imagine they did that to try to draw television eyes in Florida. Why would you put... I could see maybe you're like, all right, we're going to try to split Florida State away from UNC, away from Louisville and Duke. But to throw them all the way in the West and then for some reason put Florida Gulf Coast out there, it just seems like they tried to manufacture it into, hey, here's the game. You guys got to fly to the West Coast and now play, and hopefully people in Florida watch this game.
Yeah, when it comes to the TV end and the marketing end, I don't understand how they come up with the things that they do. But that matchup in itself was one that, I'm hoping Florida State can pull it out, but it's crazy during a tournament. I don't know if they have the consistency to knock them off.
Yeah, it should be. That's in that same Western bracket with Gonzaga that I talked about earlier that has Notre Dame and West Virginia. So that's going to be a pretty brutal Western bracket that's going to have some good games, because if Florida State wins, there's a potential they play Maryland, an old ACC foe. And then you also have VCU, who made a Final Four run a few years back, and Arizona, who's potentially the best team in the West.
Absolutely.
So I know that they split that up because they want that Arizona-Gonzaga matchup, but just in that Western bracket, you have a ton of other storylines that you can run with.
Now, overall, who did you have with your Final Four?
Well, it pained me, but I had to go with North Carolina. I know that they'll probably choke. I just don't think some of these, it comes down to coaching. And I know that whenever you put it on the line, there's a good chance that talent sometimes overcomes that. But looking at that bracket, I figured they would either play UCLA or Kentucky. And I think that the coaches for those other 2 teams are just so poor. Roy Williams, he's not a great coach. Like, he gets out coached by Coach K all the time. But with his talent level, he just outcoached. He's like a little bit better than the other big time coaches who were mainly recruiters. So I have them coming out. I don't have them in the title though. I did have Oregon. Oregon has length and they have athleticism, and I don't think you can look past it.
Now, they did lose one of their key players to an ACL injury.
I know, I did see that, and so I don't know if I'll adjust this pick or not, but I did these Sundays they announced a bracket, and I haven't gone back in, and so I don't know, but even there, I'm assuming Michigan's going to be worn out. They had to play 4 games in a row after playing rec in the Big Ten tournament. So even if Michigan makes it, they might give Louisville a run, but I'm assuming that Oregon's going to play Louisville. And then after that, they would play, I don't know who would come out of the top of that right now. I had Purdue going up against Kansas and Kansas coming out on top, but I don't know. We'll see. I'm going to have to revisit that side. On my other side, I had Duke. Duke's going to come out probably. They just started to click at the right time, right before the tournament, and their bracket sets up. They have an easy bracket. They're going to come up probably against Villanova. The only other team that might make a run out of there would probably be Wisconsin. So you could have a Duke-Wisconsin rematch. I think they played for the title a few years ago, which is probably what the committee wanted. If you're thinking about the television ratings, they're either going to get Duke-Villanova or they're probably going to get Duke-Wisconsin. I just don't see, Virginia maybe, but Virginia, even if they win and let's say Wisconsin wins, Wisconsin plays the same style as Virginia. So it's going to be another barn burner. And then, which ones did I do? I started with North Carolina. And then I had Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame's going to make a run. And they've been close before. And normally teams that knock on the door, and I had them playing Arizona. And I had them beating Gonzaga the game before that. I don't know what rounds these are. Just looking at my bracket. So that's my 4. I guess I'm pretty ACC heavy. I know, but at this point, whenever you keep expanding and adding basketball schools, you're just going to have a basketball conference. And some of the schools aren't going to be able to compete. I was actually looking at the ACC tournament history going in to see which teams have won it in the past. And if you take Duke, North Carolina, and North Carolina State, they've won, I don't know the exact percentage, but they've won like 85 to like 95% of the tournaments. Those 3 schools from North Carolina. Like I think North Carolina State had 10, Duke had like 20 maybe, and North Carolina had like 18 or something crazy. And so then you have other schools like Clemson who have never won it, who have been in the conference since 1950. So, you're just going to have a top-heavy basketball conference until at least Coach K retires. Or if the UNC thing, I don't know. So the Tar Heels have been under investigation for academic fraud. They went on academic probation by their accreditation board. And I want to say that yesterday was the day that they had to declare or fight the accusations against the NCAA. And they've done it for 2 or 3 times in a row. And each time, the first time the NCAA came back and it gave them what looked like lighter sanctions, but the NCAA or UNC went ahead and fought back. And then the very last one they got, I think it was like in December, they added men's basketball back on the docket. So now there is a chance that men's basketball could come under sanctions. And so I haven't seen anything come out, but I'm pretty sure the deadline was yesterday. I don't know if the NCAA would have done that
right before the tournament. Well, I think that could really change some of the dynamic in the ACC if North Carolina were to go under sanctions and to have some pretty stiff penalties. That may hurt them, but I think there's so many other schools. Leonard Hamilton at Florida State's really starting to recruit well and building Florida State up. I think they're now starting to pull some of those higher tier talents down to Tallahassee that maybe they can pick up some slack down the line. Notre Dame's always been pretty consistent, even when they were playing in the Big East for basketball. That they had decent numbers, decent runs. I think they're going to be okay with those numbers. regardless.
Yeah, and I say we'll end it with that. And just to follow up, like you said about Florida State's on a run, North Carolina State had a great recruiting class, so they fired their coach. I'd imagine, I think they had 2 5-star recruits. I'd imagine they would go pro, but you never know if they hang around for another year, get a nice hot coach come in, they could turn around quick. The big one, like I said before, is how long is Coach K going to coach? If he retires, that's going to swing some of the appeal away from that Duke-UNC matchup, unless they can pull in a big-time coach. But I think some of their coaches haven't panned out. I believe Duke had another alum coach at Stanford, and he got fired a few years ago. I don't know how many of their other former players or from the Coach K tree are still around that they could pull in to fill that job right away.
It'll make things interesting, if for nothing else.
Yep. Well, all right. Thanks for joining me today, and good luck with your picks.
Same to you.
All right, Richie Leahy back here again. Hope you enjoyed that chat with Matty B. We're getting into the NCAA tournament a little bit. I was talking about my article on how the first 4 shouldn't include automatic qualifiers. The idea behind that, again, is so that teams are rewarded for winning their conference. They shouldn't have to play in another meaningless, I guess it's not meaningless, but another play-in game, one that they don't really deserve to be in because they already have to face the top seed beforehand. They know they're going to. And now they have to play another potential 16 seed. So they're going to be tired going into that game against the 1 seed. And then people wonder why the 1 seed never gets upset. And then the other thing we got into were a little bit about the seeding for the actual tournament. It was a little bit strange this year. I don't know why. I don't know if they were trying out different formulas and things. I've been digging into the RPI a little bit. I don't know how much that is used. I would like to kind of see how many seeds fell within their RPI range, at least 1 or 2 places off, and how many did not. So I might try to put together something like that. But on the other hand, what I'm doing is we're still almost set up with the site. I put this at the end because I figured people don't want to hear about blather regarding our site at the beginning of the podcast. So we got right into it today. So we're going to end with this. I just almost have everything set up. We're working on setting up a Southbound Sports store. So if you feel like contributing or you like our content and want to show it off, you can go ahead and get one of those. It will be linked in our main menu. We're still hosting with Medium. That's going to be our host for pretty much ever, and as long as they allow us to live there. So content will be up. I think I must have all of my articles moved over from the old site. I think Matt and Jeff got theirs moved in. So most of our content should be there. I started to have search engines crawl our articles, so those should start showing up. And the next thing on the docket to move and get ready is the research database. I know I've teased it for a few months now, so that is next in the pipeline once we get the store set up and we start crawling the search engine stuff. So follow us on social media, Southbound Sports on Twitter without the O in sports because they cut us off 1 character too long. And then you can like our Facebook page. We had a group for a while, so I know that people are looking at it because it let me see views. So just go ahead. I think the URL is different, but they're both linked from Medium. And hopefully, I've been testing this out. We're going to start doing some live coverage. I thought about doing it for the first week of MLS, but I couldn't get it considerably worked out. So hopefully here with the NCAA tournament, we can provide some of that. So keep an eye out for that. And thank you for listening. You've been listening to the Southbound Sports Podcast with Richie Leahy.